So the next answer is regarding Moses. And so basically, I believe an individual was asking about the different founders of various religions. And so this is Abdul Baha providing his answers to their specific questions. So regarding Moses, Moses was for a long time a shepherd in the wilderness. Regarded outwardly, he was a man brought up in a tyrannical household, and was known among men as one who had committed a murder and become a shepherd. By the government and the people of Pharaoh, he was much hated and detested. It was such a man as this that freed a great nation from the chains of captivity, made them contented, brought them out from Egypt, and led them to the Holy Land. This people from the depths of degradation were lifted up to the height of glory. They were captive, they became free. They were the most ignorant of peoples, they became the most wise. As a result of the institutions that Moses gave them, they attained a position which entitled them to honor among all nations, and their fame spread to all lands, to such a degree indeed that among surrounding nations, if one wished to praise a man, one said, "Surely he is an Israelite." Moses established laws and ordinances. These gave life to the people of Israel, and led them to the highest possible degree of civilization at that period. And one of the interesting concepts about progressive revelation is that basically, over time, society, as it grows and develops, it's in the need of a new educator, which these individuals are. And so you can't really, at least, justly or fairly, I think, compare today's norms on a ancient society. If you look at people from the Roman times or from, even cavemen, and if you were to go back and see the kind of lifestyle that they were living, it's vastly different than what we have now. And much of what our current state of society is based upon, these laws and ordinances that were developed over a long period of time. I think it was like the Hammurabi Code. I'm probably saying it wrong. But, for that point in time, that was a very, for a lack of a better word, I guess, progressive idea that an eye for an eye. And I know that's also in the Bible as well, but, that's like a pretty common theme. I shouldn't say common, but it's, I think kind of like Noah's Ark, it's been spread throughout various people in the world. And so this concept of bringing people up to a more enlightened state, I guess, over time is kind of like a central point to progressive revelation. And so through Moses and, Abraham before him, in terms of taking people towards the concept of one God, and Moses bringing about new sets of laws, when these new laws are instituted into a society, that society tends to progress and to develop. And if you look throughout the world's major religions, I think you could find that if during when that particular religion was at its, obviously at its height, but right after, and I'm not talking necessarily about any kind of political or human aspects that may cause certain aspects of that particular region to decline, but more in the sense of that rebirth, that rejuvenation of those people, you will see that those civilizations tend to flourish and prosper. And I think that this goes back to the need of an educator and the idea that as a society develops over time, certain laws and certain rules help continue that progress. And so if you have a society that is morally debased, not really living up to the full potential of its time and place for what it's meant to be as like a human being, I think that's when you start to see society decline. And you may have heard that saying about, great men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. And so that whole cyclical nature of things is, I think, just a part of society and a part of life. And in many ways, we're experiencing probably some of the best elements of civilization right now in the world. Being a human now is probably one of the best times to be a human in terms of technology, the information, the internet, being able to, talk to people from all over the world. But we do have our own problems. But that's just like the nature of the beast. Things are going to ebb and flow. Society is going to go in a cycle. It's going to rise, it's going to decline, it's going to fall. The Mayans, their idea was about having society in terms of it being cyclical in nature. And as things, I think that's just a particular element of, it's almost like a law, it's like an entropy. Things that are made are going to decay and rot, and they have to be rejuvenated. And the idea behind the progressive revelation is that over time God sends, his manifestation of himself to teach and guide humanity. To such a development did they attain that the philosophers of Greece would come and acquire knowledge from the learned men of Israel. Such an one was Socrates, who visited Syria and took from the children of Israel the teachings of the unity of God and of the immortality of the soul. After his return to Greece, he promulgated these teachings. Later the people of Greece rose in opposition to him, accused him of impiety, arraigned him before the Areopagus, and condemned him to death by poison. Now how could a man who was a stammerer, who had been brought up in the house of Pharaoh, who was known among men as a murderer, who through fear had for a long time remained in concealment, and who had become a shepherd, establish so great a cause, when the wisest philosophers on earth have not displayed 1,000th part of this influence? This is indeed a prodigy. A man who had a stammering tongue, who could not even converse correctly, succeeded in sustaining this great cause. If he had not been assisted by divine power, he would never have been able to carry out this great work. These facts are undeniable. Materialist philosophers, Greek thinkers, the great men of Rome became famous in the world, each one of them having specialized in one branch of learning only. Thus Galen and Hippocrates. I could pull like a Bill and Ted and be like Socrates and Hippocrates. So maybe that's what it is. Became celebrated in medicine, Aristotle in logic and reasoning, and Plato in ethics and theology. How is it that a shepherd could acquire all of this knowledge? It is beyond doubt that he must have been assisted by an omnipotent power. Consider also what trials and difficulties arise for people. To prevent an act of cruelty, Moses struck down an Egyptian and afterward became known among men as a murderer, more notably because the man he had killed was of the ruling nation. Then he fled, and it was after that that he was raised to the rank of a prophet. In spite of his evil repute, how wonderfully he was guided by a supernatural power in establishing his great institutions and laws. So I think kind of the, besides what we covered just now, I think a lot of that kind of goes into the aspect of God's guidance through Moses and his teaching of the people. And another thing with progressive revelation is, while it is in a sense a bounty for that particular people to receive that manifestation of God, that messenger, it's not as if those people are just so well deserving that's why they occurred. God sends a messenger to the people in the world that are the most spiritually deprived for that point in time, and that's where the manifestation of God would come from. So you can look in the Bible and see all kinds of really wild stories of what was going on in the Old Testament. And I think Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, he has some really interesting podcasts about what life was like in the ancient world. And he hears some of that stuff, and it's just mind-boggling what people experienced. But I think it's really cool that Abdu'l-Baha goes back and talks about Socrates and Plato and Hippocrates, and how, and recognizes how influential and how monumental they were as men. And at the same time, kind of pointing out the fact that they were so monumental and influential and great men in society and the world, yet they only relegated their knowledge to one particular point. And so the fact that Moses or Abraham or all of these other individuals coming from either no education or low birth and having such positive influence kind of lends to itself to the divine aspect of their nature.